My landlord was watching me through a peephole, so I blinded him. I reached the end of my rope when it came to dealing with abusive, perverted men, and I'm happy I made at least one of these types of men pay for his behavior and suffer for it for the rest of his life. If I could do it all again, I would in a heartbeat. I'm a 22-year-old female college student. I recently moved into a new apartment after escaping an abusive relationship. We lived together and I was being hurt physically on a daily basis. I knew I needed to get out fast, so I signed a lease for the first place I could afford. Like I said, I'm a college student, so I couldn't afford a very nice place on my own. I moved into a crappy little rundown apartment building. When I first met my landlord, I thought something seemed off about him. He seemed like a really weird old man. I could have never guessed just how perverted and effed up this man actually was. I found out after I signed the lease that he actually lives in the unit right next to mine, and the couple of times I've seen him in the hall he always stares at me without blinking or saying a word. I uncovered an ugly truth about my apartment this week, and I wish I never moved into this awful unit. I was in my bathroom blowing out my hair after a shower, when I noticed a hole drilled in the wall about the size of a dime. I can't believe I never noticed it before. It's right next to my shower. I looked into it and saw an eye staring back at me. I realized the hole had been drilled in the wall I shared with my landlord, and I started shaking as I realized I must have been being watched by him for God knows how long now, maybe since I moved it. Of course, I wanted to call the cops, to pack my stuff up right there, but honestly, times are so rough right now and I do not have the means to move right now, let alone afford a whole new place. I had enough of men harassing me, abusing me, and using me. This incident made a switch flip in my brain, and instead of calling the cops, I decided to take revenge into my own hands. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a college student and I happen to be a chemistry major, so I have access to a full lab of dangerous chemicals. The next day while I was on campus, I loaded a special type of spray bottle with a small amount of sulfuric acid. I knew I was going far with my revenge, but I didn't care in the slightest. I knew this old pervert deserved to pay. The next time I took a shower, I acted normal. I didn't care that he was certainly watching me. It would be the last thing he ever saw with that eye. Halfway through my shower, I quickly lined up the spray bottle of acid with the peephole, and pulled the trigger. I immediately heard my landlord scream and collapse on the other side of the wall. I laughed to myself and he kept screaming and screaming. Finally, my other neighbors called the ambulance after all the screaming, and we all gathered outside to watch them take him away on the stretcher. Before he was bandaged up, I saw blood leaking from his burned eye. His eye looked like a bloody raisin sitting in his eye socket. I made conversation with the EMT, and asked if my landlord was going to be alright. The EMT said he'd be fine, but he would bet money that he had totally lost that eye. I had to restrain myself from smiling, and I just hope he comes home and looks through the peephole with the other eye.